Hey guys, welcome to the MedRep podcast. We're excited today to kind of launch our entrepreneurial episode. This will be the first version of that. So I've went and dug up a dear friend of mine, Jason Perez, who is the CEO at the Veritas Group. But actually more from an exciting perspective, a co-founder of a company called Yards.com, a tech-based company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. So we're here to talk about exactly how he's gotten to this point, some insight into his mind a little bit, as scary of a place as that may be, but also hear about, look, we're firm believers that there are consistencies between entrepreneurs. And Jason Perez, being a serial entrepreneur, he's going to pick out a couple things I know that he's going to discuss that can help us all, whether it be characteristics, whether it be mindset, whether it be the way his heart or his vision function. And so we're going to pick up from that, man. So we're excited to have you. I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you, Chaz. Absolutely, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on. And, it's an honor just coming from someone like you to be able to get on the podcast and kind of share my thoughts.
No, man, that's great. I think let's start the episode. I think it's important. I think everybody has different definitions. I think we throw around words. We get too used to throwing around words like entrepreneur. But if you wouldn't mind, what is Jason Perez's definition of entrepreneur?
Yeah, so a lot of people do have very different definitions of entrepreneur, right? And a lot of them are, in my opinion, kind of confused on what a real entrepreneur is. They tie it to either money or success, or they tie it to owning a business or whatever it might be. But for me, an entrepreneur is really that urge that's inside you, right? To create something that's tied to a business that involves risk that you're willing to take,
Sure.
right? And there's some pieces to that. So one is, an entrepreneur has that hunger. They have that urge inside them to continue to improve, to make changes, to create something that's bigger than themselves, right? The other piece I really think is, there is a risk factor. Some people have identified it and said, hey, it's about going into the unknown, right? It's about building a business with some type of uncertainty there. And so I think real entrepreneurs are constantly looking and going, hey, there's a hunger inside me. I gotta somehow feed that hunger through some type of self-sufficiency, and I'm willing to take the risk. I'm going to do it. And there are plenty of people that want to do that. There are plenty of people that have the hunger to do that, right? But then they don't do it. So that would kind of leave you out from being an entrepreneur, right?
Sure.
You might have the entrepreneur hunger maybe, but you're not an entrepreneur because you never took that risk. You never went out and actually did it. And then there's people that own businesses but really aren't entrepreneurs, right? Because they're not there. They're there for a job just as much as working for a corporation. So I think for me, it's tied to hunger, self-reliance, the willingness to build a business and to take on that risk.
And I think you hit on something. I think, look, entrepreneurship has been glamorized, whether it be Hollywood or on Instagram or on LinkedIn, any social platform we see entrepreneurs, all we see are the ups, right? And so that's
Absolutely.
A little bit of the crux of social media is that you only see the ups. Like, is anybody in here filming you in this office we're sitting in at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're banging some workout and, you're not at home with your 2 boys, you're not at home seeing your wife? Like, nobody's posting that on Instagram because it's not glamorous. That's not sexy. Right. So I think we've gotten too used to it, just seeing the upside, which is why I think in this gig economy, everybody's an entrepreneur. But I think you just hit on the difference of being the label itself versus actually living and breathing it.
No doubt.
And I mean, and I'm glad you hit on that. Take that one step further. What are some of the, we'll call them sacrifices, things you've given up in order to found the Veritas Group, in order to co-found Yards.com? What are some of the things that you would highlight that were actual sacrifices for you that have basically produced the man that I'm looking at today?
Yeah, so there are a lot of sacrifices that you go through, and I think each person has to kind of evaluate what those priorities are that they're willing to sacrifice, right? But no matter what, you can always say, hey, family's first, or God's first, or philanthropy, or my hobbies, or whatever it might be, right? You have this list of priorities and you go, these are my priorities. But once you become an entrepreneur, I think everything takes second seat to your business. And that doesn't mean that you will do something for your business before you do something for your family. because that's not the case. I mean, my priority in regards to decision making is always going to hold my family first. But the reality is my day-to-day decision making, right? When it comes to where am I spending the most time, right? Where's my mind wandering off to all the time, you know? So you might physically be there, but somehow your business, right? That spirit in you, you can't even watch a show without seeing something going, you know what? I can create a business out of that,
Sure.
right? Or someone talking to you.
Sure.
Oh, so one, you're sacrificing your mind, you know, and your emotion and your persona to being an entrepreneur. I think that's the first sacrifice you make, and it's not voluntarily done. That just happens. The other piece is hobbies; those go out the window,
Gone.
right? I mean, family events, you want to go to every single one, that's probably not going to happen. All right, every sporting event, that's probably not going to happen. Vacations, they do come, but the reality is everything goes around building that business, and you hit a certain point where other people really are relying on you, and they come part of your family just as much as your other family. And again, you're never going to sacrifice your family and the decisions you make for them. If your kid's sick, opposed to your employee, you're going to take care of your kid, right? If there's a family event opposed to a company event, and it's your immediate family, you're going to go to the immediate family. But there are concessions that you're going to have to make, and it's important that the people around you kind of understand that. And you know, hopefully, we'll get into what the people around end up doing as you progress through your entrepreneurial journey, right?
I think too, and I've been a victim of this, and it's my own fault, is that serial entrepreneurship in your mind and your heart, it never stops burning. So you think you're the problem solver for everything.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh boy.
And so you start diving down every rabbit hole because you potentially even could be an awesome solution for it. It then begins to produce an opportunity cost. Can you touch on that a little bit? I mean, touch on what opportunity cost means. You just hit on a little bit with, you know, if there's 3 events I got to be at, or 3 things, the tasks I've got to do, I've got to pick one. Well, how do you prioritize those? And where does that process start?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Opportunity cost, we talk about that all the time in our business. You know, we're a new startup, and so every single hour, every single second of the day that we're doing something, we have to be working for the business. Sure. As a startup, you know, after you build a business and it's far along, there's other people that can handle certain aspects of it. But when you're a startup, you're really the individual performing all roles of the business. So you've not only have to prioritize the tasks within your business, but then there's tasks outside of the business as well. And I think it's going to sound silly, right? But back to being an entrepreneur not being glamorous, and building a business maybe not being glamorous, it's also not that sophisticated. You know, when you look at opportunity costs, it really is a decision between A or B.
That's right.
So when you look and you go, I'm going to make a task of all the things that have to be done, right? I'm going to organize the information. I'm going to lay it down in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I'm going to prioritize those tasks, and I'm going to look at them, and some of them might not get done for 2 months, but at least I've put them down, and now I start looking. And the other piece of that in regards to, you know, opportunity costs is some stuff, just through natural progression, you procrastinate because it works better that way, you know, inherently, and other stuff you have to tackle right away, right? And so, you know, I think a prime example, because I'm sure everybody's like, well, what is that, right? Why would you procrastinate? Well, you know, when we looked at putting certain agreements for some of our partners, that's not one of those things that you put together first thing, right? You might outline what the conditions are and what the things you might want to get out of them and the things that you're going to promise them, and so forth. And there's a two-sided piece of it. But the reality is, the longer you wait, the more you define those relationships, the better that agreement is going to come together. So yes, it's a huge priority, but you're willing to kind of procrastinate on it and wait and see how that develops. And then, okay, here's the milestone. Now we really got to get serious about it and put it together. And
so by waiting, you've now made the agreement stronger.
Stronger,
as you're saying. Okay.
Absolutely.
I like that a lot. So let's dive in a little bit more on some personal topics. What was your first real job? And how did it come about?
All right. Well, I guess the question is, when you say real job, are we talking
so
W-2 or are we talking about under the table?
Let's call it the first one you would establish on your resume, like as a part of your career. Like you weren't chopping down Christmas trees the summer of high school.
Well, it's interesting because when I went to get my first real job, I actually did have a resume made of my non-real under the table type jobs that I put on my resume. I mean, again, as a serial entrepreneur, and part of that's my background of where I came from, right? My grandparents, both set of grandparents, and my parents, born in Cuba, came over, had nothing, absolutely nothing when they came over, right? Just the shirt on the back, because that's what happens when you leave a communist country. So my grandparents were entrepreneurs. My father was an entrepreneur. And you look at them and you go, okay, well, they owned a business, yes, and they were self-reliant. They clearly took a lot of risk when they came over from Cuba to a country that they knew nothing about, right? No language or how the economy per se worked. But they started businesses, right? And so for me, when it came to growing up, I saw my dad with electrical contracting company. I saw my grandfather with the landscaping company. And so it was easy. I was like, well, my dad, he's an electrician. I'll crawl through attic spaces, right? And I'm gonna get paid. And so he paid me for crawling through attic spaces. And my neighbors, they needed the lawn mowed. So I mowed lawns and I made a ton of money. And, something as simple as scooping dog poop, I was out there doing that.
Right.
Now, when I put my first resume together, and this is the thing about an entrepreneur, there is no such thing as a no per se, right?
Sure.
Like there's nothing that's impossible in my mind. So when I went in to the Video City back when there were actual, VCRs and people went out and rented
when
videos.
Blockbuster was still around, yeah.
Yeah, I went in there with a resume and it had, working for my father as an electrician, and I did. I was underage, but I was doing it, and I was mowing lawns not just for my grandfather, but I had my own lawn mowing. That I was
clients,
doing. In our neighborhood.
Sure.
So, my first real job was far too young that this country would allow me to work. But the reality is, I was working very early, and I think that's again back to being an entrepreneur.
Let's talk about your background for a second. You just hit on it. I'd love to dive into that just for a second. So you're talking about your dad and your grandfather literally risking their lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To pursue some type of what they perceived as a dream at that time. Better life for themselves, for you guys. I mean, just dive in, just add some color there, because I have no context for that, right? Born in this country, the greatest country in the world, really have no want to leave. Give me some other side of that aisle.
Yeah, so my grandfather actually owned, on my mother's side, he owned his own business. He was an entrepreneur in Cuba, had actually a couple businesses, but one was very successful. And one day he showed up at the door and it literally said, "Hey, you no longer own this business. It's owned by the government. Please report to the federal office to find out what your job, right, is going to be." And I think that was, pretty much the motivation for him as well as all my other family to go, holy moly, we have no choice here, right? There is no individuality. There is no, working and getting paid for your worth. None of that exists, right, in that environment. So they did. They risked their life. They were people were spitting on them as they got on the plane and yelled at and punched. I had people that were political prisoners, in a family that was political prisoners there in Cuba. But they got here and they knew, right, that all they can do is work to succeed. There was no other option. It wasn't, oh, well, either we work and succeed or we go back somewhere, right? There was nowhere to go back to. It was, you're here in the States, you're going to bust your hump and you're going to make something of yourself. And my parents, had the same expectations. They were young, they were children, they were in elementary. But my grandparents told them, hey, you're going to school, you're going to do well, you're going to learn English in 6 months, you have no other option. And as soon as you can start working, you're going to get a job, right? And so everybody worked as hard as possible to reach their potential, right? And that's what they believe, and they're huge patriots, from my grandparents to my parents, and I think what you find in a lot of the Cuban and refugee community is that they come here to the U.S. and it's just a huge blessing for them. It's the greatest country in the world, not just because everybody says it, but because literally they came from a terrible country and now they get to compare the black and the white, of differences in the economy, in the government, in democracy. They get to really live those differences.
You almost wish you could borrow a little bit of that context, every day. For me, or for most of us, even the viewers here, we don't understand that at all. You can watch the news, you can hear stories, but it's not real like it is to you and to your family. So you almost wish you could borrow a little bit of that fire, where there's no other option, as you mentioned. Like going another route or even failure just frankly isn't an option.
But that's being an entrepreneur as well.
Sure.
That's
what I was trying to get to. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's in you and you're driven and there's no way of going back. And here's the other thing. I did work in the corporate world for a little while after running, again, being a serial entrepreneur. I had a dance company that was very successful. We were packing the house. And I was an instructor, and then I had a dance company that would travel and perform. And we were making $500-600 an hour teaching dance, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what put me through college. So when I graduated college, I had absolutely no debt, right? But after that, I graduated from college, and I said, well, I got to get a job, right? And that's what's expected of me. And so I went out and went to the corporate world, and I busted my hump there just like it was my own business. I gave everything of myself, and I wanted, process improvement and innovation and going in and shaking things and making it just really passionate in an environment that might not be passionate because it's corporate,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And then what I realized after some time that no matter how hard I worked, unless I was CEO of that company, I wasn't going to change the whole culture of the whole company. I can change my bubble. I can change my office, but culturally I would not be able to change the whole company unless I was the head of that company. And so it hit a point where I looked and I said, look, my values, my culture is very different than the company. And so it's just time for me to leave. And I was very fortunate. I had a mentor, Mr. Dan Hughes, that's absolutely phenomenal. He's still my mentor. He's a chair of, he was a chair of both my advisory boards and still is the chair of my advisory board. And he gave me the opportunity. He said, hey, and kind of just put some breath in my lungs and said, go out and do it.
Go get it.
This is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? Do it. And I just need that little nudge, right? To go out and do it. And I guess it worked out all right.
I would say. So with the audience, a majority of the audience listening usually on our podcast are independent salespeople, really in the medical industry, right? And so these are individuals who identify products and services and they go rep them themselves, or they work for that corporate gig that you just mentioned, right? They're working for a large pharma company, a large med device company, but they call me by the dozens a day. And these are guys making $250, $300 a year, miserable, Jason, miserable, asking how it is that you can get into this independent world, right? The glamour side of entrepreneurship, which, as we talked about, you agree and I agree, it's more than money. It's more than just autonomy. It's more than just freedom. What would you say to those individuals who are on the fence, who are in the corporate gig, the 9-to-5er, if you will? What would you say to them if they are on the fence about transitioning and just flat out working for themselves or being independent?
Well, start by this. More than likely they're miserable because they're starving. When we talk, if we're going to talk about hunger, we got to talk about what the symptoms of hunger are, right? And you're fatigued, you're starting to atrophy. You might atrophy your mind, you might atrophy physically, emotionally, spiritually. You just start to atrophy, right? And you're starving yourself. And at a certain point, you have to somehow feed yourself, right? And as an entrepreneur, the only way that you do that is to go out, take that risk, experience self-sufficiency, right? And the first time that you go out And, my really good friend Jimmy Brady and co-founder of Yards will tell you, when you're fishing, the first time you hook that big bass and you've never done it before, because he teaches people all the time how to go fish, right? I mean, he's semi-pro, big time fish tournament guy. He will tell you when he takes somebody out and they catch their first fish, their eyes are twice the size as they ever were. And it doesn't even have to be a big fish, to be honest with you.
Sure.
It just has to be a fish.
They're fish. They're first. Yeah.
They're first,
They're
right?
first, yeah.
And all of a sudden, it changes their life, right? I accomplished that. It was my hand, my work. I got in that environment. I got in the fish's head, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And I was able to trick them into thinking that bait was real.
Taking your lure,
and taking that lure, right? And it's one thing to take somebody else's lure. Another thing to make your own. I mean, be a fly fisherman. Make your own fly.
Sure.
And then catch your first fish. That's even bigger, right? So what we're talking about is actually going out and doing something that you've never done before, proving it to yourself, right, that you can do it, taking that risk and seeing the fulfillment that comes with it. And like anything, without the risk, you can't have the reward. And the risk and reward is always tied to these ROI type statements. Oh, well, if I have a risky portfolio, I'm going to get more money. If I take this risk, this is the reward. What I'm saying is, without that risk, you cannot feed that hunger, right? Or you have just got to decide that that's not for you, and you have to suppress it and you have to put it away. And the reality is, you're probably going to be miserable still, and you're going to continue to have some question, something begging in the back of your mind, eating away at you, day in and day out, going, I should have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the answer is not, well, one day when I retire, because that's definitely not the answer.
Sure. No, that's a good point, man. I mean, there are so many people I speak with on a day-to-day basis that if I could push them over the ledge, I would. But I don't want them to want it for me, right? Or for anyone else, because you and I both know if you do the entrepreneurial gig, okay, and it's for any other reason than you wanting to live that dream you're describing, that's your why, whether it's your family specifically or just the financial freedom or just the time of freedom that you're going to obtain from that. If it's any other reason that it's a personal decision, it's not going to last.
Agreed.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah, because you're not going to get more time.
Sure.
And you're not going to get more money.
Sure.
At least not initially.
Sure.
And some people, again, it goes back to the risk. Some people get funded big time. They go out with millions and they're like, I'm an entrepreneur. And I look, I don't know if you're really an entrepreneur, to be honest with you. And that's not to say that you have to be poor to be an entrepreneur, right? That's just to say that there's a certain spirit that's in a person that regardless, right, whether I have the money or not, right, whether the future is 100% secure or not, it doesn't matter what it is, I am driven to do it. I want to build it.
And I think at the end of the day, and you've touched on this and you just haven't said it, is, and I've seen this quote multiple times, you're either building your own dream or you're building someone else's. And that's a hard reality. You're either making your own dreams come true or you are producing someone else's dreams. And the second I saw it like that, now again, I've never held a corporate job, and by the grace of God, I never will, but I still see it every day. I see it enough to know I don't want one. Right? And so it's things for that reason that at the end of the day, if I'm not building my own dream, the dreams that we have set forth, then it's someone else's, brother.
Yeah, and I want to distinguish something here that I know this goes out to people that are entrepreneurs, people that really want to build something themselves, right, and be self-reliant. But I want to emphasize that it's okay if that's not you either. There are plenty of people that find so much fulfillment and living a very, balanced life, right? A secured and balanced life. And I love that. I love when anybody can find fulfillment, right? I love it. If you want to live it in a tent in the middle of nowhere and never worry about starting a business or never want to work for corporate America, whatever it might be, but you find your fulfillment there, go do it. Find that fulfillment. This is only directed to entrepreneurs. because entrepreneurs have something else in them that will not allow them to find fulfillment without taking that risk,
They stay
without
hungry.
trying to build your own business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
Sure. Let's touch on, so one of the, we developed at the MedRep, we developed our why early on. And it was this litmus test that we developed that everything we did, everything we said was going to somehow pass through this filter to be true. One of those things for me was growth mindset, right? It was we're going to possess a growth mindset that, for example, filming a podcast. A year ago, there was no way I could have figured this out, but we figured it out, okay? Mainly my partner who's not present, Derek, we figured it out. That's part of because we said, I can't do this yet. That was always going to be a part of anything we couldn't do. Right. Yet, if we determined as a business it made sense to pursue something, we were going to figure it out because we started, Jason, at the very beginning with that mindset. Can you touch on the mindset that you possess or have possessed to get you to this point?
Well, it goes back to my grandfather, my father. There's a couple things that are involved with that. And again, one, there's no such thing as not succeeding, right? You go and you make it successful. And that doesn't mean that you make a ton of money. That doesn't mean that it even works, to be honest with you, because you can still fail and be successful. And people are like, okay, well, but you failed. And it's like, yeah, I might have failed, but what I did was I took that and I leveraged it, right? I have failed in the past. I had one startup that I was probably too young to go after. It was a wild idea. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of having a lot of partners and things like that. And I really think that there should be a figurehead in each company, right? And it should be agreed upon. In that scenario, there was two of us, and we were somehow going to be co-presidents of the company, equals, and equals, and it just got really messy very quickly, right? And I'm kind of one of these strong-headed, strong-willed people that I'm willing to learn every day. I'm willing to learn every day. There's not any ego when it comes to you tell me I'm wrong. Awesome, let me learn. But at the same time, I'm not going to let you tell me I'm wrong if I know that what I'm doing is right.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I took that experience and said, okay, it failed, but here's the reason why it failed. And here are the good things that came from it. I was able to leverage relationships out of it. Actually, one of the people that were in that, 15 years later, we brought back into Yards, right? Yards.com to help us kind of structure what we were going to do, right? And early on, they helped us kind of put together some branding material and things like that. I would have never had that contact if I didn't go through that experience. I also wouldn't have put other agreements in place if I didn't have that experience, right? I wouldn't structure certain things in business if I didn't have that experience. But the second that we decided that this was not a good fit back with that other business, I was already moving on. Like I didn't stumble. I didn't go, oh my gosh, I failed. Let me sulk for a little while. I said, on to the next one, because I'm making this, I'm taking anything I can and leveraging it for the next thing. Because honestly, every day is a failure or success in theory, right? Every day you're going to have a challenge. And as an entrepreneur, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. I mean, you're going to come in one day and get an email and go, crap, what is going on here? Why is this a mess? So on and so forth. And it might be theoretically a fail for the day. But you got to take that, not worry about it, move on to the next one, adapt the plan so it never happens again, right? Hopefully, or at least adapt the plan that will avoid the potential of it happening again. And then you just keep on chopping. It's a mindset of, like you said, continual growth, continual innovation. You never allow something to be that roadblock. You take it, right? If there's a stone in place, then you chisel out, some type of piece of art that would end up in Rome, right? Because that's what that stone is. It's an opportunity.
That's right. Let me dive into a little bit of a lighter question for you, just because I want to. You're a new addition to a crayon box. What color are you and why?
All right. Well, Boy, that's interesting. A colored crayon in a crayon box. Well, so first thing that comes to mind, I guess, is I think of myself more of a crayon box than a crayon.
Okay.
But we'll skip that, and maybe we'll get to that.
If that's your answer, let's hear it.
No, well, I'll start with,
okay.
My son has these cool crayons that my wife bought him, and he loves the color. But one of the crayons that he has is actually a crayon that's melted with all these different colors together, right? And as you draw, it might be green, and then it trails into a blue, and then it goes to orange and red, and it's one crayon, but it's all these mixed, and I think it's pretty awesome if they took old crayons and put that together. I'm assuming that's the case.
Yeah.
It's
the Swiss Army knife of crayons.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. But that's what an entrepreneur is,
sure.
Right? I mean, you, especially one in a startup, which most, if not all, entrepreneurs are going to be in a startup, right? But one day you're the green crayon, one day you're the blue crayon, and actually in 5 minutes I could be the orange crayon, right? Like that's just what happens as an entrepreneur, because you're dealing with the legal side, you're dealing with the marketing and sales side, you're dealing with the operational piece. I mean, you're dealing with every facet of the business, right? And you've got to be able to put that hat and switch gears very quickly. And you're not going to be able to reach back in the crayon box and go, this time I'm going to pull this crayon out. Because a lot of times you're in a conversation and they're asking you questions about your business, your organization, and you've got to know every single piece. And there's no time to reach back into the crayon box. You're just switching from color to color as it goes.
Yeah.
Now, I like to think that I'm a crayon box, or maybe the business is crayon box, because your organization is built by all these different colors, right? You have that marketing department, right? You have the tech department. You have your operational department. You have the sales and business development guys that can kill it and hit the streets. And, as they say, well, maybe I shouldn't use that term. I don't know what term to use, but sand in a sandbox, right? However you want to put it. At the end of the day, these people are really good at what they do. And so you have to value each one and look at each one. Even the data entry people are so important to an organization, because they're willing to show up and grind it out. And for them, it's not even grinding. They put on their headphones, they start doing data entry, and they don't want to be bothered.
That's it.
And I love that. I love that there are people that want to do each one of these things. And so if I could fill my crayon box with people that love being the color that they are, right, and are willing to go out and just color the world, as the organization that we are, within the culture that we are, man, that's awesome.
That's why I asked that question, because there are thousands of answers to it, I think, and I've asked it probably 1,000 times just to people that I care about and people that I trust their opinion. I think you can learn a lot about a person with that question. Seems silly at the go, but that was an answer.
It's a difficult one.
That was good.
Thank you for asking one that
you're very welcome.
Scared me.
You're very welcome. So I would be a terrible host if I didn't allow you to discuss your current endeavor, yards.com. So here we are sitting at your headquarters. Tell the audience a little bit about what it is and what your goals are.
Right. So it's a tech startup, and I'll kind of apply it back to being an entrepreneur as well, right? So we came together. So here's the thing. Jimmy, the co-founder, came to me one day and said, hey, I got this idea, right? And I want to go do this idea. And I've, me personally, I've sat on a couple of advisory boards. I've tried to help people build businesses. And he had heard about that. So he came to the office and we started talking about it. And he said, I want to start an independent rental company, right? But really a rental reservation brokerage where I can go out and represent any type of equipment rental for construction industry and rent them out and take commission off of it, right? And I'm going to represent clients so that they get the best rates, right? They have transparency to those rates. They get availability all the time. They don't have to call a bunch of people. They have a single point of contact. So as we sat and we started wrapping our brain around it, I said, here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to build a sales team. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do invoice tracking. There's some, pieces of it that you have to worry about on the liability side. And I started going through all these pieces. And at the end of the meeting, I said, if you ever want to take it to the internet, I think there's a great market for that. I think technology can really help streamline that, opposed to, having physical labor kind of putting it together. So we ended up meeting a couple more times, and as we started kind of whiteboarding, as they say, and brainstorming and putting matrices together, go, hey, does this make sense or does this not? We said, wow, this is actually a really big idea. So we got online, we started searching, we go, nobody's even doing this. How can we make this better, right? And so we put together a technology where anybody can go on. If you're in the construction industry or a farmer or whatever it might be, industrial, and you need to rent a piece of equipment, right? Lifts, heavy equipment, dirt grading type stuff, forklifts. I mean, it could be anything, right? Scissor lifts. You plug it in, it gets sent through our platform. It goes out to the major suppliers. So we have 7 of the top 10 major suppliers in the US that are on our system providing quotes back to our clients, and they get one email with all the aggregating information. And that's where it started, right? So I'm giving you kind of,
sure.
But the reality is what it's turned, because we're never satisfied, is we developed a full, a comprehensive rental management system now, where someone can go in, they can run a quote, and then once they secure that rental and they complete that reservation, they can track that asset at the project, where it's at, put notifications when the last day is going to come or a week before the last day is going to come, so that they can actually call off that piece of equipment. And it goes all the way through to some stuff that we're going to do in 2019 that's never been done before. And here's the thing, no one in the industry has ever focused on this particular technology for renters. There's plenty of stuff for suppliers. Everybody's focused on that side. But nobody goes, how do we solve a problem? How do we solve the pain points for people that are renting equipment out there and that want to get the best deal, that want to have availability, and want to have one screen where they can reference all the inventory that they have out on projects across the U.S., because some of our clients are national clients. And so that's what yards.com is. It's a solution. That's what it is. It's a solution for an industry that has not applied technology, and more importantly, that has ignored equipment renters for years and years and years. I mean, construction's been around forever. Renting equipment has been around over a century, and yet people have ignored the renters. It's amazing.
Wow. The consumer themselves.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm a big believer in ending. It's one thing to talk about this sitting here in your office, right? It's one thing to talk about entrepreneurship and what it means. It's in a conversation or a podcast. What most people fail to do is tie practicality with it. So we have an captive audience here of either entrepreneurs themselves or on the fence about being one. What would you leave them with, an action item or several action items with? What would you leave them with today?
So there's a couple, I guess, key points. If I just had to say, here are 3 things, 4 things that I want to leave you with. There's a quote by Arthur Williams, which is he was an actor in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he said, "I'm not telling you that it's going to be easy, but I am telling you it's going to be worth it." And I think the people that are there, that are looking, and they always see that happily ever after moment where everybody walks off to the sunset, right? And that's what they focus on. People need to come in knowing what the expectations are. It's going to be a grind. It's not going to be easy. Most, if not every entrepreneur that's built a successful business has gone through the garage, moments. The work 24 hours through the night because you have to hit a deadline. Oh, I wish I can hire somebody because I'm doing the job of 8 different people, but we don't have enough revenue.
Can't afford it.
Right? Like, it's not going to be easy. But what I can tell you is, every single time, when we got our first booking, right, and it came through and we had $83 that went through, right? That was our big sell.
Right.
$83. We looked and we said, wow, that's so awesome. All right, now let's go get 400 more. Because you can't get caught up in some type of triumph, right? The milestones are just milestones, right? And so that takes me to the next point, which is the difference between product and business, right? I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and again, entrepreneurs and business owners are very different. All entrepreneurs are inherently business owners, right? business owners are not all entrepreneurs, right? But the one thing that most entrepreneurs get, opposed to business owners, is that the product is very different than the business. The product is just something you built. When we built the website, which is very robust, took a long time, a lot of forethought. I mean, so many late nights of figuring out what exactly and how it was going to work, and the developers and all that stuff. And when we finally built it and were ready to go live, and it went live, do you want to know what type of celebration we had?
What's that?
We walked up to each other, Jimmy and I, and we shook each other's hand. We're like, man, this is awesome. All right. And that was it.
Yeah.
There was no big dinner and balloons and all that stuff, right? Because what we knew is we had only built a website.
Sure.
That's all we did.
Right.
It was not a business. It was a website, right? You can create a product and it could be phenomenal, but that doesn't make it a business until you learn how to market it and sell it and create revenue out of it, right? And then create reoccurring revenue out of it. It's not a business. And then you have other pieces like culture that come into the business, right? And we can talk about this for a whole nother podcast, but the reality is what I really want people to take ownership and understanding of is there's the product and there's the business. And you got to take this and go, now we have a product. How do we build the business around the product, right? And then the last thing, and I tell people about this over and over and over again, I would not be here if I didn't have the right people around me, right? All the time. And I literally mean all the time. And it's not because I was born into this, right? Although I did have entrepreneur, grandparents and parents, I wasn't born into a wealthy family. I was born in a family that we ate rice and beans. And we were just talking about it today. We would cook a big dinner on Sunday, and we'd have leftovers the rest of the week. Right. That's what we did, right? That was our life.
Sure.
And rice and beans are cheap, right? So it's easy to do that. But even, coming from that background, I have now kind of surrounded myself with so many strong, like you, right? Not only like you in that you've done this as well, but I've surrounded myself with you. I mean, I call you at least once a month to go, hey, Chaz, what do you think about this idea?
Bounce it off.
Right? So here's my recommendation to all these people that are going out there and they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to start something great. Surround yourself with the right people. And I don't just mean supportive people. I mean the right people. So for me, I tell every single entrepreneur that's starting a business, create an advisory board. And that advisory board needs to be built out of the same type of people that you would create a C-suite. You've got to find that salesperson. You got to find that operations person. You got to find somebody that knows numbers and finances and that knows valuation or mergers or acquisitions or whatever it might be, right? You've got to get that person that's an industry person. On our advisory board, we have technologists, we have digital marketing people, we have industry people on the renter side, we have industry people on the supplier side, right? We have just a business strategist. So we have, 7 different individuals that sit in our advisory board that are not us. So that's on top of us to help us make these decisions. And so surround yourself with these people, reach out to them, and believe it or not, there are a lot of successful people that have really big hearts that want to help.
Want to do it.
That's just the reality of it. And so, I think those are the 3 things if I had to drive. It's not going to be easy. Know the difference between your product and your business. And then the last one is surround yourself with people that care about you, care about your business, and can help you grow it.
Man, that was good. That was totally worth the last 30 minutes discussing. I mean, just to recap. First of all, you're hungry as hell, and I think you touched on multiple capacities. You don't take no for an answer. Growth mindset is there. You're surrounding yourself with the right people. As far as I'm concerned, we've heard many millionaires say this. Your network basically ends up being your net worth. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And so you touched on that too. So I think this is gold for those either guys starting to sell for themselves, and ones on the fence who are wanting to do it. So I'm thankful for you, man. I appreciate you doing this, and this is our entrepreneur episode, and we're going to be interviewing entrepreneurs of all kinds. Look, you're at yards.com right now. 5 years from now, it could be something different. That's what's exciting about it.
Yep,
right?
that's it.
And you have nothing to do with medical right now. But I think the points, again, they're consistent across the board, regardless of industry, are they not?
Yeah, I mean, my last business, right,
Yeah.
and I still have it, is a project management business. And it's actually, we focused on mission critical construction. So it's in healthcare,
Sure.
it's in data centers, it's in telecom, it's in biotech.
Right.
But it's project management construction, right? And this is different. And at one point, I had a dance company. I mean, when people hear that, they go, what? And especially when I used to have a 9-inch beard, you know, and you knew me with a 9-inch beard, right?
Yeah.
They're
like, what?
And riding a Harley, they're like, that guy doesn't salsa
he
dance.
can't salsa.
But that's, you know, that's what I did for a while. And and the reality is, you know, like you said, 5 years from now, it could be very, very different. And, you know, maybe I'll be an author. Maybe I'll be maybe I'll start opening up some restaurants, because I do love food and I'm always hungry.
I know that for a fact. Well, guys, thanks for listening in. This is Entrepreneur episode with the Med Rep. We appreciate you. Go out there and get it.